The massive crystal dome of the Galactic Council stretched across the sky like a second sun. Inside its gleaming halls, representatives from 847 star systems gathered for the monthly assembly. The air hummed with the gentle vibration of the voice, the psychic network that connected every thinking being in the galaxy. Ambassador Kira stepped forward to the center platform. Her blue skin shimmered under the artificial lights as she activated the presentation. Crystal. Images of new worlds appeared in the air above her head. Green planets with purple oceans, desert worlds with twin suns, ice planets where crystalline beings built cities from frozen methane. The expansion continues smoothly, Kira announced. Her words reached every mind in the chamber instantly, translated perfectly by the voice. A human would have seen her mouth, moving in one language while hearing completely different sounds. But there were no humans in the galaxy yet. 17 new civilizations have joined the Council this cycle. All transitions were peaceful. The assembled delegates nodded their approval. Some had tentacles instead of heads. Others were pure energy beings contained in mechanical shells. A few looked almost human, but with scales or extra arms. Despite their differences, they all shared one thing. They could speak to each other through thought alone. Supreme Chancellor June floated above the assembly in his meditation sphere. His species had given up physical bodies centuries ago, existing as pure consciousness within crystalline matrices. Through the voice, his thoughts touched every mind present. 3,000 years of peace. His mental voice carried pride and satisfaction. 3,000 years without a single war. The voice has made us one people across 1,000 worlds. Far from the Grand Assembly, in a monitoring station on the galaxy's outer rim, two young technicians stared at their screens with growing confusion. Hyun adjusted his headset for the 10th time that hour. The readings made no sense. Nara, look. At this signal, he called to his partner. I've never seen anything like it. Nara glided over on her hover chair. Her people had evolved in low gravity, making them tall and thin with delicate movements. She studied the display with interest. It's definitely artificial, she said. But the energy signature is all wrong. It doesn't match any known propulsion system in our database. The signal came from deep space, beyond the outermost council worlds. Something large was moving toward them at incredible speed. The computer estimated its size at over 3 kilometers long. Should we report it? Hyun asked. Nara hesitated. Young technicians who filed false reports often found themselves assigned to asteroid mining stations. But the signal was definitely real. Send it to Admiral Bora's office, she decided. Let the military decide if it's important. Admiral Bora received the report while reviewing fleet exercises near the Veltar homeworld. She had commanded the Council Defense Force for 40 years. In that time, she had never fired a shot in anger. There had been no need. Every species they encountered eventually joined the Council peacefully. The voice made conflict impossible. How could you fight someone when you could feel their thoughts and emotions? When you understood their fears and hopes as clearly as your own? Even the most aggressive species became peaceful within days of first contact. Bora dismissed the report. Without much thought. Unknown signals were common on the frontier. Usually they turned out to be natural phenomena or ancient automated probes from dead civilizations. Probably another derelict, she told her aide, Commander Tay. File it with the Archaeological Survey team. But Tay studied the data more carefully. His species had excellent pattern recognition, evolved from hunting pack animals on a world of endless forests. "Admiral, the signal shows intelligence," he said. "It's changing course to avoid stellar hazards, and the energy output suggests active engines, not drift." Bora sighed and activated her command screen. The signal data appeared in the air before her. She had to admit it looked unusual. "Very well. Dispatch a scout ship to investigate. If it's another lost colony ship, offer them standard assistance." Neither Bora nor Tay could imagine that the approaching vessel represented something entirely new, a species that had developed faster than light travel without any psychic abilities at all, a species that had never heard the voice and could not be touched by it. Deep in space, the human warship UES Defiance continued its journey toward the galactic core. Captain Lee Day stood on the bridge, studying the star charts his science team had compiled. Humanity had been exploring space for 50 years now, moving carefully from system to system. They had found ancient ruins on dozens of worlds, traces of civilizations that had once spanned multiple star systems. But no living aliens. Not yet. "Captain, we're picking up radio signals from the next system," reported Communications Officer Sue. "Multiple sources. It looks like a heavily populated area." Lee Day felt his pulse quicken. First contact. Every spacer had dreamed of this moment. The chance to meet another intelligent species and prove that humanity wasn't alone in the universe. "Reduce speed to half impulse," he ordered. "Full sensor sweep. I want to know everything about them before we make contact." "Sir." "The signals are strange," Sue continued. "They're not using radio for communication. These look more like navigation beacons and automated systems. I'm not detecting any actual messages between ships or planets." Chief Science Officer 1 frowned at her instruments. "Captain, I'm reading massive space installations throughout the system. Hundreds of ships, but they're not broadcasting on any frequency we can monitor." Lee Day nodded thoughtfully. Every species would develop differently. Perhaps these aliens use technologies humanity hadn't discovered yet. "Maintain course but stay alert," he decided. "Prepare a first contact package. Mathematics, physics, peaceful intentions. The usual protocol." What Lee Day didn't know was that the aliens weren't using radio because they didn't need to. They spoke directly from mind to mind across vast distances. The voice connected every ship, every planet, every individual in an invisible web of consciousness. Back in the council chambers, Ambassador Kira finished her presentation to enthusiastic mental applause. The expansion of galactic civilization continued exactly as it had for 3 millennia. New worlds, new species, new members of the great cosmic family. Supreme Chancellor June felt deep satisfaction through the voice. The network that connected them all grew stronger with each new addition. Soon, perhaps within another 1,000 years, every thinking being in the galaxy would be part of their peaceful confederation. "Are there any other matters to discuss?" June asked the assembly. Silence filled the mental link. Peace reigned across 847 star systems. No conflicts, no misunderstandings, no failures of communication. The voice ensured perfect harmony. None of them knew that in just a few hours, everything would change. A ship approached that could not hear the voice. A species immune to their most fundamental technology. Humanity was coming, and the galaxy was about to learn what silence meant. The great crystal dome of the council chambers caught the light of their sun, throwing rainbows across the peaceful assembly. It would be the last such gathering in galactic history. Captain Lee Day walked through the corridors of the UES Defiance, making his final inspection before entering the unknown star system. The warship hummed with quiet efficiency around him. 3 kilometers of human engineering, designed for exploration, and defense in equal measure. Unlike the peaceful council ships, the Defiance carried weapons. Humanity had learned the hard way that space could be dangerous. Their own history taught them to be ready for anything. "Status report," Lee Day said as he entered the bridge. Lieutenant Rin looked up from her tactical station. "All systems green. Captain, weapons powered but not targeted. Shields at standard strength. Communications ready for first contact protocols," added Officer Sue. "I've prepared packages in 17 different mathematical languages." Lee Day nodded and settled into his command chair. Through the main view screen, he could see the distant glow of their destination, a star system filled with the signs of advanced civilization. "Drop us out of FTL at the system's edge," he ordered. "Nice and slow. We don't want to appear threatening." The Defiance shuddered slightly as it fell back into normal space. Immediately, the sensor screens lit up with contacts. Hundreds of ships moved between the planets. Massive space stations orbited several worlds. The system teemed with activity. "My God," whispered Science Officer Wan. "They've completely colonized this entire system. The energy readings suggest a Type 2 civilization at minimum." Lee Day studied the display with growing excitement and concern. Humanity was still struggling to colonize their second star system. These aliens had built an empire that spanned multiple worlds. "Any response to our arrival?" he asked. "Nothing on radio," Sue reported. "But several ships are changing course toward us. I count 15 vessels, all larger than us." In the Council monitoring station, Hyun nearly fell from his chair as the unknown ship appeared on his screens. It had materialized right at the system's edge, exactly where his instruments had predicted. "Nara! It's here!" he shouted. Nara rushed over, her tall frame moving with urgent grace. The sensor display showed a massive alien vessel unlike anything in their databases. It had sharp angles and aggressive lines. Even to their peaceful eyes, it looked dangerous. "Alert the defense force immediately," Nara said, "and activate the first contact protocols." Within minutes, Admiral Bora's flagship was leading a small fleet toward the unknown vessel. 15 ships of various sizes, all equipped with the voice, transmitters for instant communication with any intelligent species. Commander Tay stood beside Admiral Bora on the command deck, watching the alien ship grow larger on their screens. "No response to our greeting signals," reported the communications officer. "But the universal translators are active. The moment they try to communicate, we'll understand them perfectly." Admiral Bora felt confident. In 3,000 years, first contact had always followed the same pattern. Initial confusion, then the magical moment when the voice connected with the alien minds. Understanding would bloom instantly, followed by peaceful negotiation and eventual integration into the Council. "Maintain standard approach," she ordered. "Continue broadcasting the greeting sequence." The voice reached out from the Council ships like invisible fingers, seeking any hint of consciousness from the alien vessel. The psychic network that connected every thinking being in the galaxy strained to make contact with these newcomers. But something was wrong. Chief Engineer Minho monitored the voice transmitters from the engine room of Bora's flagship. He had maintained these systems for 20 years and knew their every fluctuation. But now they showed readings he had never seen before. "Commander Tay," he called over the intercom, "the voice transmitters are strange. They're functioning perfectly, but it's like they're hitting a wall." Tay frowned and called up the technical displays. The voice was broadcasting at full power, but the signals seemed to stop dead around the alien ship. A sphere of absolute silence surrounded the vessel. "Admiral," Tay said slowly, "I don't think they can hear us." "On the Defiance, Captain." Lee Day watched the approaching alien ships with growing concern. They had been broadcasting some kind of energy pattern for 10 minutes now, but his communications officer couldn't decode it. "It's not radio," Sue reported. "Not laser communication either. The energy signature is completely unknown. It's almost like they're trying to scan our brains directly." Chief Medical Officer Jin looked up from his console with alarm. "Captain, whatever they're broadcasting is definitely aimed at neural tissue. My instruments show it's designed to interact with conscious thought patterns." Lee Day felt a chill run down his spine. Were these aliens trying to attack their minds? Humanity had always feared contact with hostile species, but they had imagined weapons and armies, not mental assault. "Raise shields to full power," he ordered. "Block those transmissions." The Defiance's defensive systems activated, creating an electromagnetic barrier around the ship. The alien transmissions stopped reaching the human vessel entirely. In the Council fleet, the reaction was immediate and terrifying. "Admiral!" Minho's voice cracked with panic. "The voice transmitters just went dead. I'm showing complete system failure across all frequencies." But it wasn't just the transmitters. Every council officer on every ship suddenly found themselves cut off from the voice. For the first time in their lives, they were truly alone in their own minds. Admiral Bora staggered as the familiar background hum of connected consciousness vanished. She had never experienced such complete isolation. Without the voice, she couldn't sense her crew's emotions or communicate with her officers on other ships. "What's happening?" she asked aloud, her actual vocal cords rusty from disuse. Commander Tay was examining his instruments with growing horror. The alien ship's defensive systems weren't just blocking the voice. They were disrupting the psychic network itself, creating a dead zone where no telepathic communication could function. "Admiral, they've somehow damaged the voice. We can't communicate with the other ships." For 3,000 years, no council citizen had ever experienced true mental isolation. The feeling was overwhelming. Officers throughout the fleet began to panic as they found themselves trapped in their own thoughts for the first time. On the Defiance, the humans watched in confusion as the alien ships began moving erratically. Some had stopped completely. Others were turning away as if fleeing. "Sir, their formation is breaking apart," Lieutenant Rin reported. "It looks like they're having some kind of system failure." Captain Lee Day studied the tactical display. The aliens had approached in perfect coordination, but now they moved like ships whose crews had never worked together before. "Are we causing this somehow?" he asked his science officer. One checked her instruments carefully. "Our shields are blocking their transmissions, but I don't see how that could affect their ship operations. Unless..." She paused, her face growing pale. "Unless what?" Lee Day demanded. "Unless their transmissions weren't meant for us, Captain. What if they were, communicating with each other through some kind of telepathic network? If our shields are blocking that signal..." The implications hit everyone on the bridge at once. They hadn't just prevented an alien mental attack, they had accidentally severed the aliens' ability to communicate with each other. Admiral Bora forced herself to think clearly despite the crushing loneliness. Without the voice, she had to rely on primitive visual signals and short-range radio to coordinate her fleet. Systems that hadn't been used for warfare in millennia. "Signal all ships," she ordered, her voice hoarse from speaking aloud. Maintain distance from the alien vessel. Do not approach the interference field. But the damage was already done. The alien ship sat in the center of a sphere of absolute silence, where the voice simply didn't exist. And that sphere seemed to be growing larger. Commander Tay realized. The terrible truth first. The aliens weren't trying to attack them. They were just defending themselves. But their defenses were devastating the foundation of galactic civilization. "Admiral," he said quietly, "if this spreads, if more of these ships arrive—" He didn't need to finish the sentence. They both understood. The galaxy had spent 3,000 years building a civilization based entirely on psychic communication. If that communication could be blocked or destroyed, everything would collapse. On the Defiance, Captain Lee Day made a decision that would change galactic history. "Stand down from alert status," he ordered. "But maintain shields, whatever's happening. To them, I don't want it happening to us." The human ship hung in space like a hole in reality, surrounded by confused and frightened alien vessels. Neither side understood what was happening. The humans thought they were defending against a telepathic attack. The aliens thought they were facing a weapon that could destroy the very concept of communication. Both sides were right and wrong, and the galaxy would never be the same. Admiral Bora struggled to coordinate her fleet without the voice. Speaking aloud felt clumsy and slow after a lifetime of instant mental communication. Her officers looked confused and frightened, isolated in their own minds for the first time ever. "Signal the alien vessel," she ordered, her voice echoing strangely in the quiet bridge. "Full spectrum broadcast on all frequencies. They must understand our authority." The communications officer, his blue hands shaking, activated every transmitter on the ship. Radio waves, laser pulses, subspace signals, everything the Council used for long-range communication with non-telepathic machines. But they had forgotten how to actually speak to another species. For 3,000 years, the voice had done all the work. "Admiral, what do we say to them?" the officer asked. Bora realized she didn't know. First contact protocols assumed the voice would handle translation instantly. No one had bothered to learn the old methods of establishing communication with mathematical sequences or universal concepts. "Broadcast our fleet identification codes," she decided. "And power up the warning displays." Throughout the Council fleet, massive holographic projections activated. Images of the galactic map appeared in space, showing the vast extent of Council territory. Then came displays of Council authority, legal codes, fleet strength, the signatures of 800 star systems. It was meant to be impressive. A show of power that would convince any reasonable species to surrender and request peaceful contact through the voice. On the Defiance, Captain Lee Day watched the alien light show with growing alarm. "They're showing us their territory," Science Officer Wan reported. "If these maps are accurate, they control most of the galaxy's inhabited systems." Lieutenant Rin studied the tactical implications from her weapons console. "Captain, those holographic displays include detailed fleet positions and military assets. Either they're trying to intimidate us, or they don't consider us a threat worth hiding their capabilities from." Communications Officer Sue worked frantically at her station. "I'm still not getting any actual communication attempts. No mathematical sequences, no universal symbols. Just identification codes and what looks like legal documents." Lee Day felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. Humanity's first contact with alien life, and it was going badly. The aliens had approached with overwhelming force, attempted some kind of mental attack, and were now displaying their military might. "They want us to surrender," he concluded. But we don't even know what they want or why they attacked us. Chief Medical Officer Jin looked up from his console with concern. Captain, I'm still detecting those neural scanning attempts. Weaker now, but they haven't stopped trying to penetrate our shields. That decided it for Lee Day. These aliens had attacked first with some kind of mind weapon. Now they were demanding surrender while continuing their assault. Humanity had learned from its own bloody history. When threatened, defend yourself. Charge the main batteries, he ordered. Warning shots only. Let them know we're not helpless. The Defiance's railgun arrays came online with a low hum that vibrated through the hull, targeting computers locked onto empty space near the alien flagship. 3 tungsten slugs launched at a significant fraction of light speed, designed to miss but demonstrate their capability. The kinetic projectiles streaked past Admiral Bora's ship close enough to register on proximity alarms. The council officers stared at their instruments in shock. The aliens had just fired solid matter at them at incredible velocities. They're using kinetic weapons, Commander Tay said with disbelief. Primitive projectiles instead of energy beams. But primitive didn't mean ineffective. The council's energy shields were designed to stop lasers and plasma bolts. They would offer little protection against high-velocity solid objects. Admiral, if those projectiles had hit us, the tactical officer's voice trailed off. Bora understood. Their shields would have failed instantly. The alien weapons weren't advanced, but they were brutally effective against Council defenses. Return fire, she ordered. Disable their weapons systems. Energy beams lanced out from the Council ships, beautiful streams of focused plasma designed to overload enemy shield generators. The aliens would be disabled but unharmed, ready for peaceful negotiation once they realized the futility of resistance. On. The Defiance. Alarms screamed as alien energy weapons struck their hull. Direct hit on forward shields, Rin reported. Shield strength holding at 85%. These are definitely military-grade weapons, Captain. Lee Day gripped his command chair as the ship shuddered under multiple impacts. So much for warning shots. The aliens had escalated to full attack. Return fire, he ordered grimly. Target their weapon systems. Try not to destroy them completely. The Defiance's response was swift and devastating. Railguns that had been designed to fight other human warships found the alien vessels surprisingly vulnerable. Their energy shields offered no protection against kinetic impacts. Admiral Bora watched in horror as her flagship's main gun array disappeared in a shower of debris. The alien projectiles punched through their defenses like they didn't exist. Shield. Failure on decks 12 through 15. Damage control reported. Weapon systems offline. Around the fleet, other Council ships suffered similar damage. The aliens fought with a precision and ruthlessness that shocked the peaceful civilization. Every shot was aimed to disable specific systems rather than destroy entire ships. Commander Tay realized the terrible truth. Admiral, they're showing restraint. They could destroy us easily, but they're trying to disable us instead. Restraint? Bora couldn't believe it. They're tearing our ships apart. No, Admiral. Look at the damage patterns. Every hit targets weapons or engines, never life support or crew quarters. They're trying not to kill us, but the Council officers didn't understand this mercy. Without the voice to share emotions and intentions, they couldn't sense that the aliens were trying to minimize casualties. They only saw devastating attacks that destroyed their weapons and left them helpless. Captain Lee Day studied the tactical display with growing frustration. The alien ships had stopped firing back, but they weren't retreating either. They just hung in space, apparently disabled. "Cease fire," he ordered. "Damage assessment?" "Minor hull damage from their energy weapons." Rin reported. Our kinetic barriers handled most of the impact. All systems operational. Communications? Any response from them now? Sue shook her head. Still nothing I can interpret as actual communication. Just more of those neural scanning attempts. Lee Day rubbed his forehead. This was supposed to be humanity's great moment. First contact with alien intelligence. Instead, it had turned into a one-sided battle, where neither side understood the other. Sir, Science Officer 1 said carefully, I've been analyzing the wreckage from their damaged ships. Their technology is highly advanced, but it's specialized in ways that don't make sense. Explain. They have incredible energy manipulation capabilities and materials that are far beyond our understanding, but their kinetic defenses are almost non-existent. It's like they've never encountered physical projectiles before. The implications slowly dawned on Lee Day. A civilization advanced enough to span most of the galaxy, but with no experience fighting kinetic weapons? What kind of enemies had they faced in the past? On the Council flagship, Admiral Bora faced her own realization. Her fleet was crippled, unable to communicate with each other or with the alien vessel. The voice remained blocked in a growing sphere around the enemy ship. Status of other Council fleets? She asked. We can't contact them, Tay replied. The interference field extends beyond our communication range. For all we know, the entire sector has gone silent. The true horror of the situation began to sink in. If this alien technology could block the voice permanently, it could destroy galactic civilization. 3,000 years of peace and unity, ended by a single ship that couldn't even hear their desperate attempts at communication. Admiral, the science officer reported, I'm detecting more anomalies. The interference field isn't just blocking the voice. It's damaging the psychic network infrastructure itself. Even if they leave, some systems may never reconnect. Bora closed her eyes, feeling the crushing weight of loneliness that came from being cut off from the galactic mind. Around her, the bridge crew struggled with the same isolation. They were like children learning to walk again after a lifetime of shared consciousness. Can we signal for reinforcements? She asked. Not without leaving the interference field, Tay replied. And if we do that, we lose track of the alien ship. It was an impossible choice. Stay and face destruction by weapons they couldn't defend. Against, or flee and lose the only chance to understand this threat to galactic civilization. In the silence of the Defiance's bridge, Captain Lee Day made his own difficult decision. We need to try real communication, he said. Something that doesn't depend on their neural scanning technology. What do you suggest, Captain? Asked Communications Officer Sue. Lee Day looked at the disabled alien ships on his screen. They had shown mercy by not destroying his vessel outright. Perhaps they were as confused as he was. The battle resumed without warning. More Council ships had arrived from deeper in the system, their commanders unaware of the communication breakdown. Admiral Bora watched helplessly as her reinforcements approached the Defiance, still trying to use the voice to coordinate their attack. Captain Lee Day saw 20 additional alien vessels closing in on his position. His warning shots and attempts at mathematical communication had been ignored. Left with no choice, he prepared to defend. His ship and crew, all stations, combat alert, he announced over the ship's intercom. We're outnumbered, but we're not outgunned. Fight smart, fight hard, and get us home. The second wave of Council ships opened fire immediately, their energy weapons creating a dazzling light show across space. But they suffered from the same coordination problems as the First Fleet. Without the voice to link their thoughts, they couldn't synchronize their attacks or share tactical information. Lieutenant Rin coordinated the Defiance's response with cold efficiency. Target the larger ships first. Use the fighter screen to confuse their targeting systems. Launch bays opened along the human warship's hull, disgorging squadrons of small attack craft. The Council had never seen anything like them. In their peaceful galaxy, ship-to-ship combat was rare and ritualized. The concept of small fighters swarming around capital ships was completely foreign. Commander Tay watched the human tactics with growing amazement and horror. The alien fighters moved in perfect coordination, supporting each other with covering, fire, and synchronized attacks. Meanwhile, his own ships stumbled around like blind giants, unable to coordinate without the voice. "How are they communicating?" he asked his tactical officer. "Radio transmissions," came the reply. "Primitive electromagnetic signals, but they're using complex encryption and frequency hopping. I can't decode their meaning." The human fighters struck like a pack of hunting wolves. They targeted specific systems on each Council ship: engines, weapons, communication arrays. The Council vessels, designed for the stately combat of a civilized galaxy, couldn't adapt to this chaotic swarm tactics. Engineer Minho, trapped in the engine room of Bora's damaged flagship, felt the ship shudder under repeated impacts. He had never experienced anything like this before. Council warfare was usually a matter of formal duels between single ships, with clear rules and honor codes. This was something else entirely. "Hull breach on Deck 7, came the damage report. "Emergency bulkheads holding, but we've lost 3. Weapon turrets." On the Defiance, Weapons Officer Kai coordinated the battle with grim satisfaction. Humanity had learned to fight the hard way, through centuries of warfare against their own species. These aliens might be more advanced, but they fought like they had never faced real opposition. "Their formation is breaking up," he reported to Captain Lee Day. "They can't coordinate without that telepathic network we're blocking." "Don't get overconfident," Lee Day warned. "We're still outnumbered 3-1, and their individual ships outmass us significantly." But the human advantage was becoming clear. Every Council ship fought alone, its crew struggling with the unfamiliar sensation of mental isolation. The Defiance and its fighters worked as a unified force, sharing information and supporting each other with practiced ease. Chief Science Officer Wan monitored the expanding interference field with growing concern. "Captain, the dead zone is getting larger. Our shields are amplifying the effect somehow. We're creating a permanent scar in their communication network." "Can we reduce the interference?" Lee Day asked. "Not without dropping our shields. And if we do that, they'll resume their neural attacks." Lee Day faced an impossible choice: maintain defense and continue damaging the alien communication system, or lower shields and risk his crew's minds to whatever weapon the aliens were using. The decision was made for him when a Council heavy cruiser broke through the fighter screen and unleashed its full firepower on the Defiance. Energy beams that could melt asteroids struck the human ship's kinetic barriers in a cascade of brilliant light. "Hull damage on multiple decks," Chief Engineer Yoon reported. "Barriers holding, but we can't take many more hits like that." "Target that cruiser," Lee Day ordered. "Full battery, maximum yield." The Defiance's main railguns spoke with thunder that shook the entire ship. 3 tungsten slugs, each massing several tons and traveling at a significant fraction of light speed, struck the Council cruiser's midsection. The result was devastating. The alien ship's energy shields offered no protection against kinetic impact. The projectiles punched through the hull like tissue paper, venting atmosphere and debris into space. Admiral Bora watched her most powerful ship die in seconds. The alien weapons were primitive by Council standards, but brutally effective. Her beautiful energy shields and advanced armor meant nothing against simple kinetic force. "Order all ships to retreat," she commanded, her voice hoarse from speaking aloud. "We cannot win this battle." But without the voice, coordinating a retreat proved almost impossible. Some ships received the order and began to withdraw. Others, unable to hear commands, continued fighting. The Council fleet scattered in confusion, some ships fleeing while others pressed their attack. Commander Tay tried to signal the remaining ships using primitive light patterns and radio transmissions. It was slow and clumsy compared to the voice, but gradually the message got through. One by one, the Council vessels broke off their attack and pulled back. The Defiance hung in space, surrounded by wreckage and debris. Captain Lee Day surveyed the battlefield with mixed feelings. They had won, but at what cost? The alien ships showed clear signs of advanced civilization. He might have just committed genocide against the galaxy's most peaceful species. Casualty reports from the alien ships, he asked. Chief Medical Officer Jin had been monitoring the Council vessels with passive sensors. "Surprisingly low, Captain. Their emergency systems are excellent. Most of the crew compartments remained intact, even on the destroyed ships." "They were trying not to kill us too," Science Officer Wan added quietly. "Look at the weapon impacts. On our hull, every shot was aimed at systems, not crew areas." The terrible irony of the situation became clear. Both sides had been trying to minimize casualties while defending themselves. Both had failed to communicate their peaceful intentions. The result was the first major space battle in 3,000 years. On the Council flagship, Engineer Minho worked frantically to restore basic ship functions. The alien projectiles had damaged systems he didn't even know existed. But worse than the physical damage was the spreading zone of silence around the alien ship. "Admiral," he reported, "the voice network is failing across multiple sectors. The interference is cascading through the psychic links." Admiral Bora felt the galaxy dying. Around her, reports trickled in from the edges of the interference field. Entire star systems were going silent as the voice failed. Billions of beings suddenly found themselves alone in their own minds for the first time in their lives. "How far is it spreading?" she asked. "Unknown. We've lost contact with 17 systems already. The effect seems to be self-propagating through the network infrastructure." Commander Tay stared at the human ship on his tactical display. Such a small vessel to cause such catastrophic damage. "Admiral, we need to contact the Supreme Council immediately. This is beyond a first contact situation. This is an existential threat to our civilization." But they couldn't contact anyone. The expanding dead zone had cut them off from the galactic communication network. They were trapped in a sphere of silence that grew larger by the hour. On the Defiance, Captain Lee Day made the hardest decision of his military career. "Stand down all weapons," he ordered. "Launch a communications probe with our first contact package. Full spectrum broadcast on all frequencies." "Sir, they might interpret that as surrender," Lieutenant Rin warned. "Maybe that's what we need right now," Lee Day replied. "We've proven we can defend ourselves. Now we need to prove we're not monsters." The probe launched from the Defiance's hull, broadcasting mathematical sequences and peaceful intentions on every frequency human science understood. It was a desperate attempt to bridge the gap between two civilizations that had developed along completely different paths. Far away, in the great crystal dome of the Galactic Council, Supreme Chancellor June felt the first stirrings of panic. Entire sectors of the voice were going dark. The perfect network that had united the galaxy for 3 millennia was failing, and he didn't know why. "Emergency session," he commanded his staff. "Contact all fleet commanders immediately." But there was no one to contact. The dead zone continued to expand, carrying silence to worlds that had never known it. The galaxy's voice was dying, system by system, as the interference from humanity's defenses spread through the psychic network like a virus. The age of perfect communication was ending. What would replace it, no one could say. Dr. One studied her instruments with growing horror. The interference field around the Defiance wasn't just blocking the alien telepathic network, it was fundamentally altering the structure of space-time itself. Whatever these aliens used for communication, humanity's defensive systems were poisoning it at the quantum level. "Captain, you need to see this," she said, calling Lee Day to her science station. "The dead zone isn't just electromagnetic interference, it's something much worse." Lee Day leaned over her shoulder, studying the complex readouts. "Explain it. In simple terms, Doctor." "Think of their communication system like a spider web made of invisible threads spanning the entire galaxy. Our shields aren't just blocking those threads, they're burning them away, permanently." The implications hit Lee Day like a physical blow. "You're saying we can't undo this damage?" "Not with any technology, I understand. We've created holes in the fabric of their communication network that may never heal." Chief Medical Officer Jin approached with his own disturbing findings. "Captain, I've been analyzing the alien crew members we can scan. The psychological trauma is severe. Imagine suddenly going blind and deaf at the same time, except it's worse. They've lost a sense we don't even have." On the Council flagship, Engineer Minho confirmed their worst fears. The voice network showed catastrophic failure across 17 star systems, and the damage was spreading. "Admiral Bora," he reported, his voice shaking, "I'm detecting cascade failures in the psychic infrastructure. Every relay station the interference touches becomes infected, passing the dead zone to connected systems." Admiral Bora felt physically sick. The alien ship hung there innocently, but its mere presence was destroying the foundation of galactic civilization. "How long until it reaches the core systems?" she asked. "At current propagation rates, 6 days until it hits the inner colonies, 2 weeks until it reaches the capital." Commander Tay worked frantically at his station, trying to establish communication with anyone outside the dead zone. "I've managed to contact Admiral Kang's fleet at the sector boundary. He reports that entire planets have gone silent. Billions of people cut off from the voice simultaneously. The social impact was immediate and devastating. Council civilization had no backup communication systems. For 3,000 years, the voice had made everything else obsolete. Now, worlds that had never known isolation were plunged into complete communicative darkness. "Sir," the communications officer reported, "Admiral Kang is requesting immediate evacuation of all civilians from affected systems. Mass panic is spreading on every world that's lost connection to the voice." Bora closed her eyes, trying to comprehend the scale of the disaster. The Council had over 2 billion citizens in the affected systems. Evacuating them would require the entire fleet, and where could they go? The dead zone was still expanding. On the Defiance, Captain Lee Day received reports from his probe that painted an equally grim picture. "The mathematical sequences are being acknowledged," Communications Officer Sue reported. "But they're not responding with their own mathematical patterns. It's like they understand us but can't figure out how to respond. Science Officer 1 had a theory. Captain, what if their entire civilization has forgotten how to communicate without telepathy? Imagine if humanity suddenly lost the ability to speak or write. We'd have to reinvent language from scratch. Are you saying they're helpless? Lee Day asked. Not helpless, but severely handicapped. They've spent 3,000 years with perfect mental communication. They might not even remember how to use basic radio or visual signals effectively. The human crew watched through their viewports as alien ships drifted aimlessly in the distance. Some had begun signaling with crude light patterns, obviously struggling to coordinate even basic maneuvers without their telepathic link. Chief Engineer Yoon brought disturbing news from the engine room. Captain, our defensive systems are automatically adapting to counter their communication attempts. Even when they try to signal us with lights or radio, our shields are interpreting it as a potential attack and blocking it. Can we modify the shields? Not without dropping them entirely. The system is designed to protect against any form of directed energy or information beam. It can't distinguish between a weapon and a peaceful signal. Lee Day felt trapped by his own ship's defenses. Humanity's paranoid military technology was perfectly designed to counter threats, but it was also preventing any possibility of communication. Deep in the Council's core systems, Supreme Chancellor June finally received reports of the expanding disaster. His crystalline consciousness reeled as he absorbed the scope of the catastrophe. 17 systems silent and the dead zone still growing, he asked his emergency council. How is this possible? Dr. Hana, the galaxy's leading expert on the voice, provided what answers she could. The unknown ship appears to generate a field that disrupts psychic communication at the quantum level. But the disruption is self-propagating. Each relay station that fails infects its neighbors. Can we stop the spread? Only by shutting down the voice network entirely, Hana replied. But that would leave the entire galaxy without any long-range communication system. June felt the weight of impossible choices. Keep the voice active and watch it be systematically destroyed, or shut it down voluntarily and plunge galactic civilization into darkness. What about the unknown ship itself? Can it be destroyed? Admiral Kang's report was sobering. Our initial engagement was unsuccessful. They use kinetic weapons against which our defenses are useless. Their tactics suggest extensive combat experience. Recommendation is to avoid further military confrontation until we understand their capabilities better. But avoiding confrontation meant allowing the dead zone to continue spreading. Every hour of delay meant more systems cut off from galactic civilization. On the mining world of Zerion Prime, Administrator Yuna experienced the silence for the first time. One moment she was connected to the warm background hum of 2 billion minds across the galaxy. The next, she was utterly alone. The psychological impact was immediate. Yuna collapsed to her knees, overwhelmed by the crushing isolation. Around her, other council citizens were suffering similar breakdowns. Some screamed, others simply stared into space, unable to cope with the sudden solitude. Emergency protocols, she managed to whisper to her assistant. But without the voice to coordinate responses, their sophisticated civilization began to break down within hours. Ships crashed because pilots couldn't communicate with traffic control. Industrial accidents multiplied as workers lost their psychic coordination. Even simple tasks became monumentally difficult when people had to rely on voice and gesture alone. Similar scenes played out across 17 star systems. Billions of beings who had never been alone in their lives suddenly found themselves isolated and afraid. Back on the Defiance, Captain Lee Day watched the expanding disaster with growing guilt. Dr. One, is there any way to reverse the damage? Could we modify our shields to repair their network instead of damaging it? I don't understand their technology well enough, One admitted. It's like asking a medieval blacksmith to repair a quantum computer. We're working with completely different scientific paradigms. Chief Medical Officer Jin offered another perspective. Captain, maybe the damage isn't permanent for individuals. If we could establish safe communication, they might be able to adapt to non-telepathic methods. That's assuming they want to adapt, Lieutenant Rin pointed out. From their perspective, we're the destroyers of their civilization. They may never trust us enough for peaceful contact. Communications Officer Sue had been monitoring the alien ship's crude attempts at signaling. Sir, I'm detecting increasing desperation in their communication attempts. They're trying everything, radio, laser, even modulated gravitational waves. But our defenses block it all. The irony was bitter. Humanity's most advanced defensive systems were perfectly designed to prevent any form of communication with alien species. In trying to protect themselves from mental attack, they had made peaceful contact impossible. Engineer Minho on the Council flagship made one last desperate attempt to contact the alien vessel. He rigged a simple radio transmitter outside the ship's main communication array, hoping to bypass whatever was blocking their signals. This is Council Ship Designation Harmony, he broadcast in the ancient trade language. We mean no harm. Please respond. On the Defiance, the message got through for exactly 3 seconds before the defensive systems detected and blocked it. But it was enough. Did you hear that? Sue asked excitedly. They spoke in what sounded like simplified mathematical concepts. I think they were trying to say they don't want to fight. Captain Lee Day felt a spark of hope. If the aliens could learn to communicate through the interference, maybe there was still a chance for peace. But in the growing silence around them, time was running out. The dead zone continued to expand, carrying isolation and fear to worlds that had known only unity for 3 millennia. The galaxy's voice was fading, system by system, and no one knew if it could ever be restored. Commander Tay made a decision that would have been impossible with the voice active. Cut off from the collective wisdom and caution of the galactic mind, he acted on pure instinct and desperation. Take us closer to the alien ship, he ordered. His helm officer. Sir, that's directly against Admiral Bora's orders, the officer protested. Admiral Bora is 3 light minutes away and can't communicate with us, Tay replied. Someone has to try something different. His ship, the Council destroyer Serenity, moved slowly toward the expanding dead zone. As they crossed the boundary, Tay felt the voice disappear from his mind like a candle being snuffed out. The familiar warmth of shared consciousness vanished, leaving him alone with his thoughts for the first time in his adult life. The sensation was terrifying, but Tay forced himself to focus. His species had evolved as hunters before joining the Council. Perhaps those ancient instincts could help him where modern technology had failed. Communications. Can you access the ship's emergency beacon system? He asked. Yes, sir. Those systems are independent of the voice network. Good. We're going to try something our ancestors did long before the Council existed. On the Defiance, Lieutenant Rin noticed the approaching alien ship immediately. Captain, one of their destroyers is moving toward us, but it's not showing hostile intent. Captain Lee Day studied the tactical display. The alien ship was indeed approaching, but its weapons were powered down and its shields were minimal. Maybe they want to talk, Communications Officer Sue suggested. Hopefully. Or maybe it's a suicide attack, Weapons Officer Kai countered. We should maintain defensive posture. Lee Day watched the alien ship's approach with growing curiosity. Something about its movement seemed different from the others. Less coordinated, but more purposeful. Hold position and monitor, he decided. Let's see what they're trying to do. Commander Tay reached the edge of the interference field and activated his ship's emergency beacon. But instead of broadcasting a distress signal, he programmed it to flash in a specific pattern. "Sir, what are you doing?" his tactical officer asked. "Mathematics," Tay replied. "The most basic language in the universe." The beacon began flashing in a simple sequence. 1 flash, pause, 2 flashes, pause, 3 flashes, pause, 5 flashes. Prime numbers, concepts that should be universal to any species capable of space travel. On the Defiance, Communications Officer Sue nearly shouted with excitement. "Captain, the alien ship is signaling with light patterns. It's definitely mathematical. Prime number sequence." "Can you respond?" Lee Day asked. "Our external running lights can be modulated. I'll respond with the next numbers in the sequence. The A." Human ship's lights began flashing. 7, 11, 13, 17. The mathematical conversation continued for several minutes, with both ships confirming their understanding of basic arithmetic. Commander Tay felt a surge of hope as the alien ship responded correctly to each mathematical challenge. These beings might be immune to the voice, but they clearly possessed intelligence. "Try geometric concepts," he ordered his communications officer. "Areas, volumes, spatial relationships." The light-based conversation grew more complex. The Serenity transmitted the mathematical relationships for circles, squares, and spheres. The human ship responded with increasingly sophisticated geometric proofs. Dr. Wan watched the exchange with fascination. "Captain, they're definitely trying to establish common mathematical ground. This is genuine first contact protocol." "Can we build on this?" Lee Day asked. "Move beyond basic math to actual communication?" "It will take time," Sue replied. "We need to establish symbols for concepts like yes, no, greeting, peaceful intent. But it's possible." The breakthrough came when Commander Tay's ship began transmitting simple pictographs using its running lights. Basic stick figures representing bipedal creatures, circles representing planets, lines showing relationships between concepts. "They're showing us pictures," Sue reported excitedly. "Simple images, but clearly representational. 2 figures side by side might mean friendship or alliance. Figures with raised appendages could be a greeting." Captain Lee Day felt the first glimmer of hope since the crisis began. Respond with our own pictographs. Show them we understand peaceful intent. The Defiance began transmitting its own light-based images, a human figure extending its hand, symbols representing peace and cooperation, mathematical equations showing balance and harmony. For the first time in days, 2 species were actually communicating across the vast gulf between their civilizations. But the moment was interrupted by Admiral Bora's arrival. The Council flagship approached Commander Tay's position with obvious anger. Through crude radio signals, Bora's voice crackled across space. "Commander Tay, return to formation immediately. You are in violation of direct orders." Commander Tay faced a choice that would have been impossible while connected to the voice. The collective mind would never have allowed individual initiative of this magnitude. But alone in his own thoughts, he could make decisions based on his own judgment. "Admiral, I have established basic communication with the alien vessel," he replied. "They appear to be genuinely peaceful. They have destroyed 17 star systems." Bora responded angrily. That is not peaceful behavior. Tay looked at the human ship hanging quietly in space, its lights still flashing mathematical sequences. Admiral, I don't think they understand what they've done to us. They may not even know we're telepathic. The idea was so alien to Council thinking that it took several minutes for Bora to process it. A species without telepathy was theoretically possible, but the Council had never encountered one. Every intelligent race they'd met had some form of psychic ability. Are you saying they're mentally defective? Bora asked. No, Admiral. I'm saying they're different. They evolved along a completely separate path. They may be as confused by us as we are by them. Dr. Wan, monitoring the radio exchange from the Defiance, turned to Captain Lee Day with a startling realization. Captain, I don't think they understand that we're immune to telepathy by choice. They may think we're broken somehow. Broken how? Their entire civilization appears to be based on shared consciousness. From their perspective, we must seem like deaf and mute children who can't participate in normal adult conversation. The implications hit everyone on the bridge simultaneously. The aliens weren't attacking out of malice. They were trying to fix what they perceived as a disability. The neural scanning attempts weren't weapons. They were medical treatments. So when we blocked their scans, Lee Day began, we were refusing medical help and attacking our doctors, Chief Medical Officer Jin finished. No wonder they responded with force. Commander Tay's voice came over the radio again, directed at both Admiral Bora and the human ship. I propose a temporary ceasefire while we attempt to understand each other. Both sides have shown restraint and peaceful intent. Perhaps we can find a solution that doesn't require further violence. Admiral Bora's response was immediate and negative. Absolutely not. They have caused irreparable damage to galactic civilization. They must be stopped. But Captain Lee Day had a different perspective. This is Captain Lee Day of the human vessel Defiance. He broadcast on the same frequency. We accept the proposal for ceasefire and communication. We never intended to harm your people. The three-way conversation that followed was crude and full of misunderstandings. Radio communication was painfully slow compared to the voice, and concepts had to be explained through mathematical metaphors and simple pictographs. But gradually, a picture emerged of two civilizations that had developed along completely different evolutionary paths. The Council species had embraced collective consciousness and telepathic unity. Humanity had remained individualistic and non-psychic. You mean your people choose to be isolated from each other? Commander Tay asked with obvious confusion. We're not isolated, Lee Day replied. We communicate through speech, writing, art, music. We share our thoughts by choice, not by biology. The concept was so foreign to Council thinking that it took hours to explain. Individual privacy, personal thoughts, the ability to lie or keep secrets, all were incomprehensible to beings who had shared every thought for 3,000 years. But slowly, understanding began to emerge. The humans weren't defective telepaths. They were a completely different kind of intelligence. And their technology, designed to defend against psychic attack, was inadvertently destroying the foundation of Council civilization. Can the damage be repaired? Admiral Bora asked. Dr. Wan answered honestly. Not with any technology we understand, but perhaps your people can adapt to non-telepathic communication methods. Adapt? Bora's voice carried horror. You're asking us to give up what makes us civilized. No, Commander Tay interjected. Maybe we're being asked to become more than we were. The conversation continued through the long hours. Three very different leaders trying to bridge the gap between incompatible civilizations. Outside their ships, the dead zone continued to expand, carrying silence to worlds that had never known it. The galaxy was changing whether they wanted it to or not. The only question was whether that change would come through understanding or through the complete collapse of everything the Council had built. The emergency session of the Galactic Council convened in chaos. Supreme Chancellor June's crystalline form flickered with distress as reports flooded in from across the affected regions. 43 star systems had now gone silent, and the dead zone showed no signs of slowing. "The situation is unprecedented," Dr. Hanna reported to the assembled delegates. "We estimate that over 50 billion Council citizens are now cut off from the voice. Social collapse is accelerating in all affected systems." Ambassador Kira stood to address the assembly, her blue skin pale with exhaustion. "I've received preliminary reports from the contact zone. Admiral Bora confirms that the unknown ship contains representatives of a non-telepathic species. They call themselves humans." The reaction was immediate. Delegates throughout the chamber expressed shock and disbelief through the voice. A species without telepathy was theoretically possible, but none had ever been encountered. "How is such a thing even viable?" asked the representative from Arcturus Prime. "How do they maintain social cohesion without shared consciousness?" "According to our initial communications, they rely on verbal and written language," Kira replied. "They share information voluntarily rather than automatically." Supreme. Chancellor June processed this information with growing concern. "Are you telling me that these humans choose to live in mental isolation?" "It appears so. They seem to consider individual privacy and personal thoughts to be desirable traits. The concept was so alien to Council thinking that many delegates struggled to comprehend it. 3,000 years of shared consciousness had made the idea of mental privacy almost incomprehensible. Meanwhile, in the contact zone, Captain Lee Day faced the hardest decision of his career. Dr. Wan had confirmed that the damage to the alien communication network was irreversible with human technology. "The quantum scarring is permanent," she explained. "Even if we leave immediately, the affected regions will never fully reconnect to their telepathic network." Commander Tay's voice crackled over the radio link they had established. "Captain Lee Day, my superiors are demanding that your ship withdraw beyond our borders immediately. They believe this will stop the spread of the interference." Lee Day studied the tactical display showing the expanding dead zone. "Commander, will our withdrawal actually help your people?" There was a long pause before Tay responded. "No. The damage is already spreading through our network infrastructure. Our scientists estimate it will reach the galactic core within 2 weeks regardless of your position. Then withdrawal won't solve the problem. No. But it might prevent you from being destroyed when the full Council fleet arrives." Chief Medical Officer Jin brought disturbing news from his analysis of the alien behavior patterns. "Captain, the psychological trauma in the affected populations is severe. Beings who have never experienced mental isolation are suffering complete social breakdown. Suicide rates are climbing exponentially." The weight of responsibility pressed down on Lee Day's shoulders. Humanity's first contact with alien life had become a catastrophe of galactic proportions. 50 billion intelligent beings were suffering because of his ship's defensive systems. "Is there anything we can do to help them?" he asked. Dr. Wan had been working on that exact question. "Perhaps. If we could teach them alternative communication methods, they might be able to adapt to the changed conditions." "You mean like sign language and written text?" Communications Officer Sue asked. "Exactly. They're like a civilization that has suddenly gone deaf and blind. They need to learn new ways to share information. Captain Lee Day made his decision. Commander Tay, we propose to remain in the contact zone and assist your people in developing non-telepathic communication systems. We cannot undo the damage, but we might be able to help you adapt to it. Admiral Bora's response was swift and negative. Absolutely not. You have already caused enough destruction. Leave our space immediately or face the consequences. But Commander Tay had spent days in the dead zone, learning to function without the voice. The experience had changed him in ways he was only beginning to understand. Admiral, with respect, I disagree, he said. These humans may be our only hope of learning to survive in the new reality they've created. Are you defying my direct orders, Commander? Tay felt the weight of individual decision-making, something he had never experienced while connected to the collective consciousness. I am exercising independent judgment based on the situation I observe here. The humans have shown genuine desire to help us. They may be our salvation rather than our destruction. On his ship, Tay turned to his science officer. Can we establish a more permanent communication link with the human vessel? I believe so, sir. If we link our computers directly with hardwired connections, we could share databases and translation matrices. It was a dangerous proposition. Connecting alien computer systems could result in anything from viral contamination to complete system failure. But Tay had seen enough of human behavior to trust their peaceful intentions. The process took hours, but eventually the two ships established a direct data link. For the first time, humans and council species could share complex information in real time. Dr. Hana, monitoring the situation from the galactic capital, watched with fascination as the first truly interspecies communication protocols were developed. The humans shared their databases of language, mathematics, and communication theory. The council provided their own knowledge of psychic networks and social organization. It's remarkable, she reported to Chancellor June. They're creating entirely new forms of communication. Hybrid systems that combine their verbal languages with our symbolic representation methods. Can these systems replace the voice? June asked. For basic communication, yes, but they lack the emotional sharing and collective decision-making capabilities that have kept our civilization peaceful for 3 millennia. That was the heart of the problem. The voice didn't just allow communication. It created empathy and understanding between different species. When you could feel another being's emotions and thoughts directly, conflict became almost impossible. Without that automatic understanding, the galaxy faced the prospect of returning to the wars and misunderstandings that had plagued it before. The voice was developed. Ambassador Kira brought the fears of the outer colonies to the council session. Reports indicate that some affected systems are already showing signs of interspecies tension. Without the voice to maintain understanding, old prejudices are beginning to resurface. The Veltar representative stood to speak. My people are considering withdrawing from all mixed colonies in the affected regions. We cannot trust other species without the emotional verification that the voice provides. Similar sentiments echoed throughout the chamber. 3,000 years of peace had been built on a foundation of shared consciousness. Without that foundation, the carefully constructed galactic civilization was beginning to crumble. Captain Lee Day received reports of the growing tensions through his link with Commander Tay. Your galaxy is starting to fracture, he observed. Different species are losing trust in each other without telepathic contact. The voice didn't just let us communicate, Tay explained. It made us feel like one people despite our physical differences. Without it, we're remembering that we're separate species with different needs and desires. Dr. Wan had been studying the social dynamics of council civilization. Captain, Perhaps that's not entirely a bad thing. Perfect unity can lead to stagnation. Maybe some healthy disagreement and individual thinking could benefit their society. Not if it leads to war, Chief Medical Officer Jin pointed out. These people have been peaceful for 3,000 years. They may not remember how to resolve conflicts without violence. The conversation was interrupted by urgent signals from Admiral Bora's fleet. Long-range sensors had detected massive Council reinforcements approaching the contact zone. The full might of galactic civilization was being brought to bear on the human ship. "Captain," Commander Tay transmitted urgently, "you need to leave immediately. The War Council has been activated for the first time in 3 millennia. They're bringing weapons that could destroy entire star systems." Lee Day looked around his bridge at the crew, who had become unwilling participants in galactic transformation. "Commander, what will happen to your people if we leave?" "We'll adapt, or we'll die," Tay replied honestly. "But either way, it will be our choice to make." The human captain faced the ultimate decision. Stay and risk the destruction of his ship and crew, or leave and abandon 50 billion beings to face an uncertain future without the communication system that had defined their civilization. Outside the viewports, the lights of Council ships began to appear like stars against the darkness. The largest fleet in galactic history was approaching, ready to do whatever was necessary to protect their way of life. Time was running out, and the price of peace had never been higher. 1 year later, Ambassador Kira stood before a transformed Galactic Council. The great crystal dome still caught the light of their sun, but the atmosphere inside had changed completely. Where once 800 delegates had shared thoughts through the voice, now they communicated through a complex web of translation devices, sign languages, and written displays. The change was jarring for those who remembered the old ways. Conversations that once flowed like water now moved in fits and starts. Misunderstandings were common. Delegates sometimes spoke over each other or failed to notice when someone was trying to communicate. But there were unexpected benefits, too. "The artistic renaissance continues to flourish," Kira reported to the assembly. 17 new forms of creative expression have emerged in the former dead zones. Poetry, music, and visual arts that were impossible under collective consciousness. For 3,000 years. The voice had made all minds essentially similar. Individual creativity had been subsumed into collective harmony. But when the network failed, billions of beings discovered their own unique thoughts for the first time. Dr. Hana, now serving as Director of Communication Studies, added her own observations. "The psychological adaptation has been remarkable. While initial trauma was severe, most populations have not only survived, but shown increased innovation and problem-solving abilities." She gestured to a display showing cultural developments across the affected regions. "We're seeing technological advances that would have been impossible under the voice. Individual thinking allows for the kind of creative disagreement that drives scientific progress." Supreme Chancellor June, his crystalline form dimmer than before, acknowledged the reports with obvious reluctance. "And what of the social cost? How many systems have we lost to conflict?" The answer was sobering. 7 star systems had experienced significant interspecies violence in the months following the collapse of the voice. Old prejudices and territorial disputes, suppressed for millennia by shared consciousness, had erupted into open warfare. But the conflicts had also led to something unprecedented: negotiated peace agreements. Without the voice to enforce harmony, different species had been forced to learn compromise and diplomacy. Commander Tay, now promoted to Admiral and stationed permanently in the former dead zone, provided updates from the frontier regions. "The human presence has been educational," he reported. Captain Lee Day's crew has spent the year teaching communication protocols to anyone willing to learn. Their methods are primitive, but effective. The Defiance had indeed remained in a council space, despite the risks. Captain Lee Day had made the difficult decision to stay and help repair the damage his ship had caused. The human crew had become reluctant teachers, sharing their knowledge of non-telepathic communication with alien civilizations. The humans have introduced concepts that challenge our fundamental assumptions, Admiral Tay continued. Individual, privacy, personal responsibility, the ability to choose what thoughts to share, these ideas are spreading throughout the affected regions. Some council members found these concepts horrifying. The idea of keeping thoughts private went against 3,000 years of social development. But others, particularly the younger generation, embraced the freedom that came with mental independence. Engineer Minho, now serving as Chief of Alternative Communications, had worked closely with the human crew. The new communication networks are more robust than the voice ever was, he reported. Multiple redundant pathways, voluntary participation, resistance to single-point failure. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. Humanity's primitive communication methods were actually more advanced in many ways than the telepathic system they had replaced. Captain Lee Day himself attended the council session via holographic projection. The political situation still made his physical presence dangerous, but his insights had become valuable to the rebuilding effort. The hardest part for your people has been learning to tolerate disagreement, he observed. With the voice, conflict was impossible because you felt each other's emotions directly. Without it, you've had to develop new ways to resolve disputes. Dr. Wan, appearing alongside her captain, had spent the year studying council civilization. We've identified over 300 distinct cultural groups that were homogenized under the voice. Each is now rediscovering its unique identity and perspective. The cultural renaissance was perhaps the most unexpected consequence of the disaster. Species that had been merged into galactic uniformity for millennia were remembering their distinct traditions, art forms, and ways of thinking. But the cost had been enormous. Current estimates place the permanent dead zones at 67 star systems, Dr. Hanna reported. These regions will never reconnect to any telepathic network. They must develop alternative social structures. Some of those regions had collapsed entirely. Civilizations too dependent on the voice had simply fallen apart when the network failed. Billions of beings had died in the chaos that followed the loss of shared consciousness. Others had thrived. The mining colonies of the Outer Rim, always somewhat independent, had adapted quickly to non-telepathic communication. They were now among the most prosperous regions in Council space. What of the expansion program? Chancellor June asked. Have we made contact with other unknown species? The answer was complicated. The Council's expansion had slowed dramatically as resources were diverted to dealing with the communication crisis. But the few new species they had encountered presented a new challenge. We've identified 3 civilizations that appear to be non-telepathic, Ambassador Kira reported. Like the humans, they evolved without psychic abilities. Our traditional first contact protocols are useless with them. It was a sobering realization. The galaxy was apparently full of species like humanity, intelligent but non-telepathic. The Council had simply never encountered them before because they couldn't hear the voice. How many other civilizations are out there that we've missed? Wondered the representative from Centauri Station. How many species have we ignored because they couldn't communicate through the voice? The question haunted the new galactic order. For 3,000 years, the Council had believed they were bringing unity to all intelligent life. Now they realized they had been systematically excluding entire categories of consciousness. Captain Lee Day offered a human perspective on the situation. On Earth, we learned that diversity makes us stronger. Different viewpoints, different approaches to problems, different ways of thinking, they all contribute to progress. Even when they lead to conflict? Admiral Bora asked. She had eventually accepted the new reality, but remained skeptical of human philosophy. Especially then, Lee Day replied. Peaceful disagreement forces you to examine your assumptions and find better solutions. The voice may have prevented war, but it also prevented growth. Engineer Yoon from the Defiance had worked with Council technicians to develop new communication technologies. We're designing voluntary telepathic networks, he reported. Systems that enhance communication without replacing individual thought. The hybrid technologies combined human electronics with Council psychic techniques. The result was communication that was faster than speech, but didn't override personal consciousness. Users can choose what thoughts to share and when, Yoon explained. It preserves the benefits of telepathic communication while maintaining individual privacy. Several star systems were already testing the new networks. Early results suggested they might provide the best of both worlds, enhanced communication without the vulnerability of total dependence. But not everyone embraced the changes. The purity movement continues to grow, warned Admiral Tay. Some species are demanding the restoration of the voice, regardless of the consequences. The purists, led by survivors from the core worlds, viewed the new communication methods as corruption of galactic civilization. They sought to rebuild the voice network exactly as it had been, even if it meant excluding non-telepathic species. They represent perhaps 30% of the remaining telepathic population, Admiral Tay continued. They've established separate colonies in the unaffected regions and refuse all contact with the dead zones. The purist movement threatened to split galactic civilization permanently. They saw the new communication methods as a disease that needed to be contained, not embraced. Supreme. Chancellor June faced the most difficult decision in Council history. Do we attempt to force reunification, or do we accept a permanently divided galaxy? The debate raged for hours. Some delegates argued for military action to bring the purists back into the fold. Others insisted that forced unity would violate the very principles they were trying to build. Captain Lee Day offered a human perspective that surprised many. Perhaps division isn't a failure. On Earth, we have hundreds of different nations and cultures. They don't always agree, but that diversity has driven our progress. You're suggesting we abandon the dream of galactic unity? Asked Ambassador Kira. I'm suggesting that unity and uniformity aren't the same thing, Lee Day replied. You can work together while remaining different.